evening, everyone. I'm gonna sit down today, and I was gonna do a video with Anna, but she's not feeling so great right now, so I'm gonna do a video. You just get me today. I would want to do a video talking about my favorite, some of my favorite Disney podcasts. So I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm working. Just nice to just have someone to kind of listen to that I actually care about. Rather than just listening to music all day, I listen to podcasts. So there's a lot of Disney podcasts out there. There's Disney Parks podcasts. There's just podcasts about a company in general, stuff about the history of the company. There's all sorts of different podcasts out there. So, but the ones that I usually listen to are parks oriented, and so I kind of want to go through some of the ones that I listen to. There's 6 of them that I'm going to talk about today, and because those are the ones that I actually listen to all the time. Some of them I kind of fall behind on because I don't like them quite as well as the other ones, but I do still listen to them every once in a while because they do still have some good stuff. So I'm going to go through my kind of list, and I've kind of put them in order of where I rank them on the list of my favorite ones versus my least favorite. So, and then at the end I'll kind of mention a couple of, I think Anna has 2 on here, so I'll mention a couple of her favorites, but then we'll see if we can sit down with her and do another video talking about her favorites, and because she listens to some different ones than I do. So yeah, so here we go. The first one on my number 6 on my list is Hyperion Adventures podcast. Now this one's interesting. I don't remember off the top of my head. I don't remember the name of the couple that do this podcast. This podcast is actually really interesting, and it's not necessarily fully parks based. They do talk about the parks a lot, but they also talk about other kind of random Disney stuff. And it is kind of just some fun banter that goes on between the 2 of them. It's just really fun to listen to. I just something nice to turn on and just kind of zone out to while I'm working. And they do give some interesting information. So some of the things that they do, I think one of them was advice on the perfect Disney date or something, a date night or something like that. They did a top 5 list of the most inspirational Disney songs, I think is what it was, or most hopeful or something like that. I feel like it was inspirational, and so they do some really interesting stuff, and it's just a lot of different stuff, while also sometimes talking about the parks. So that one's a pretty good one, but that one I don't listen to quite as often. I just don't like it as well as some of the others. Number 5 is WDW Prep to Go. This one's a very interesting one, especially if you are currently preparing to go to the parks. If you're preparing to take vacation down to Disney World. So what she does is she actually will sit down. Once she records podcasts, just little kind of snippets of podcasts as she's walking around the parks when she goes, because she's from, I believe, Texas. But she goes to Disney World multiple times a year. And she'll do little snippets where she walks around while she's walking around the park. But one of the main things that she does is she will get in contact with people or people will get in contact with her who are going to Disney World at some point. And so usually it's maybe a month ahead or a couple of weeks maybe before that person's trip. And she'll kind of talk with them about what their plans are. Do they have dining reservations? Do they have fast passes already? Do they know what parks they're going to? What resort are they staying at? So she gets all of that information. She also writes it down as she goes. She gets all of that information from them, and they can kind of talk about things that they wanted. So fast passes. When they're talking about fast passes, she usually asks them did you get all the fast passes you wanted? How did you go about getting your fast passes? Because sometimes that can be a bit of a chore, especially if you're wanting to get fast passes for things like Seven Dwarfs Mine Train is usually a hard one to get. Slinky Dog Dash is usually a hard one to get. I believe they now have fast passes for Smuggler's Run in Galaxy's Edge, so that one will be a hard one to get. if they ever do a Fast Pass for Rise of the Resistance, that one will be really hard to get. So she talks to them about like how they went about, like, did they make sure that they got this one first versus the other one. And then, so usually her podcasts are really long. If you listen to that one, forewarning now, hers are usually pretty long, because she usually spends like an hour or something like that talking to the person about their upcoming trip. Maybe sometimes less. So usually that part's not as long. It's like 30 to 45 minutes. And then another like hour and a half is the second half of the podcast, where she interviews them again after they've taken their trip and come back. And then that part's actually really interesting, because then she talks to them about, okay, here's what I have you know, this is what you said you were going to do on this day, and talk me through what you did and if you were able to do all of this. And so they go down and they're like, yeah, we were able to do this, we did do the dining, or like, no, we weren't able to make this because like the ride went down or something like that, and so instead we did this. And it's just really interesting to see. And it's a really good one if you are preparing to go to the parks yourself, mostly because it's nice to be able to listen to somebody else who is also going through the same thing, and kind of getting an idea of how other people are planning, because that'll give you an idea of like how to do it yourself, especially if you've never done it before. It's just kind of nice to have that. So that one's a really good one for preparing to go to the parks. Number 4 is WDW Radio. The only reason that I have this ranked higher than WDW Prep to Go is simply because it gives a lot more different information, and it's also just, there's a lot of fascinating things. And this guy, he does interviews with different cast members and other people who have just go to the parks all the time, and so he's doing interviews with a bunch of different people, and it's really, really fascinating. And so that's the only reason that it's ranked higher than the last one. It's just because that kind of information is like, I don't know, there's something about it. I really like that, learning that kind of thing. I'm weird like that. It's super fascinating. And again, this guy, if you do want to go listen to his podcast, just like the last one, be forewarned, most of his podcasts are incredibly long. And I think one of them that I listened to was almost 3 hours long, which for me is great, because like I said, I'm listening to it at work. I just pop my headphone in and just go off, and it's 3 hours of him droning in my ear, and like I don't even necessarily pay attention to the whole thing. I pay attention to enough of it to know what's going on, but I don't necessarily fully pay attention to it the whole time that it's going. So, but it is really, really, really interesting. So, number 3 is the Dreams Unlimited Travel podcast. This one is part of the Diz line of podcasts and stuff. So the Diz is a website and group of people who their sole purpose is to give people information about Disney. So they have the Diz website, where they have just a whole bunch of different news stories and stuff from the parks and surrounding, and kind of what's going on there. And they also have the Diz boards, which is just kind of a social media thing about where just a bunch of different people can go on and ask different questions about their upcoming trip. So they can ask like, what's the best way to do this, or what's the best park to go to at this time, or this and that. Any question that you could have, the Diz board can. If you go on the Diz board, somebody will probably have an answer. The Diz also owns Dreams Unlimited Travel, the travel agency that Anna and I use. And I don't know how long their podcast has been around. I feel like it's not been super long, but they have a separate podcast now where they will just sit down and talk about different things about traveling to Disney. So theirs are a little shorter. There's about 30 minutes each, roughly. One of their last ones that they did, or it was the last one they did, I believe, was about how to save money for Disney. So it's not talking about saving money while at the parks. It's talking about the best way to save money so that you can go on a Disney trip. And there was a bunch of different information that they gave. Well, I think they had like 5 things on their list from the one person, and the next episode is the next person's list. So, and And they do just a bunch of different ones, and it's about, like I said, they're a travel agency, so it's about any of the things that they do. So they do Disney World, they do Disneyland, they do Disney Cruise Line. They also do, I believe, Royal Caribbean Cruise Line as one of their things. So they do shows about each one of those, and it's different information. So like one of them was about the new stuff that was coming up in Disney World, that was opening in Disney World, or reopening, as it were, in a couple of cases. There was, the dog's barking out there. There was another episode talking about some of the discounts that had dropped, because Disney drops discounts all the time, and so they did an episode about the discounts that dropped. And so that one's a really good informational one, especially if you're like, don't have a time to listen to a lot of podcasts. That one's a nice short informational one, just about different things that are going on in Disney that you might need to know about, like with your trip coming up. So that's a good one to listen to when you're getting closer to your trip, just so you have like any of that information. And there's another one that's really good for that, and we'll get to that in a second. Number 2 is the TTA podcast. The TTA, or the Tomorrowland Transit Authorities, is actually a combination of a couple of YouTubers. Rob Plays and Ivy Winters, I think, her channel. I'm blanking on her. I just listened to one of their podcasts earlier today before recording this, while I was at work, and I'm blanking about Christine. That's her name. But her channel is Ivy Winter. And the two of them, they have really good chemistry. They're really good. They're pretty good friends. Rob lives in Orlando. He lives near the parks. Christine lives up like in New Jersey or something like that. And so like she lives further away, so she doesn't get to the parks as often as Rob does. But they do just a bunch of different informational things about the news that's going on in with the parks, or just Disney in general. They do. They talk about their own trips, or their own like treks to the park, or different things, and their experiences in restaurants, or in ride queues, or in like a gift shop, like just anywhere. They talk about their experiences and like what they liked about it, and they'll talk about things like Disney Plus, or just general things that are going on with Disney. And so theirs is really fun to listen to as well. And there's usually, at the longest, an hour, but that's actually really long for them. Usually it's between 30 to 35 minutes for theirs. They try to keep it down to like 40 minutes at most. But every once in a while they go a little long. So that's actually, on Anna's list here, that's on her list of one of her favorite podcasts to listen to. So she really likes that. And lastly, number 1, this is my favorite podcast that I listen to. Like I said, I like all of them, and I like listening to all of them. This one, if I had to pick one podcast to listen to and I couldn't listen to any of the other ones, this is the one that I would choose. And this one is called The Diz Unplugged. So this is another one from The Diz. And it's usually about an hour long, sometimes a little longer, but usually about an hour long. And they give so much information about things that are going on in the parks. They all live down there, and they usually have one or two of the travel agents with them. And this is the company that runs the travel agency that does this. And so they usually have a couple of the travel agents with them that kind of, and so you get the kind of that side of everything too. But they'll each go around and do like, and read one of the news stories from the week, depending on how many there are. And then they'll go around and do like what they call a rapid fire, which they just kind of, just random Disney parks tidbits that are going on, or sometimes just mostly Disney park tidbits that are going on, or things that they think that people should should be aware of or pay attention to. I think one of the things that I like about it is that they've all been doing it for quite a while together. The guy that started the company, Pete, that runs that hosts that show, he's been doing it for 20 years. I think it's been 20 years that he's been doing like the travel, that he started the travel agency and the Diz and the Diz boards type thing, for like giving people information. So he's been doing it for a long time, and most of the people that are there, with the exception of one, I think she just started like a couple months ago, but the rest of them have been doing it for a few years now. So they all know each other really well. So they have a really good chemistry. It's also one of those podcasts that the reason that it doesn't go longer than an hour is because the host, Pete, is really good at keeping them focused, and you can kind of tell when when Pete has to be out because he's sick or they'll go do other things. He does the Adventures by Disney trips to like France and stuff like that. And so when he's gone, somebody else will host it, and you can tell the difference because he's really the one that keeps everybody kind of tied in and focused on what they're doing. So yeah, they they cover different things from Adventures by Disney to stuff that's going on in the Disney parks. They talk about Disney Cruise Line. I think the Adventures by Disney is one of the most interesting things they talk about, because one of the things that they actually do is that they will they'll actually get like a Diz exclusive group. Like they will essentially they'll contact Adventures by Disney, I think. I'm not exactly sure how it works, and they get essentially a special cruise. So like if you're going on the Diz exclusive Adventures by Disney trip for like the river cruise I think they're doing a river cruise here before too long in France again. So if you're doing that, like it's just people that are fans of the podcast that are doing that, because that's how you find that information, is you're getting it from the podcast or just from the Diz or Dreams Unlimited travel. And so it's like a group of like-minded people, plus usually at least two other people. So like the host Pete and usually one other guy, I can't remember his name, will go on those trips. Usually one or two more of them will as well, but at least those two do. And so like you can meet these guys and like talk to them. It's just really fascinating. And the Adventures by Disney are really fun to hear about, especially for me, just because I am so like I love like other cultures, other places. And so it's really fun to hear them talk about, especially because when they get back, they talk about the trip that they just went on. They'll sit down and be like, okay, this is, kind of what we did. They do kind of a quick overview of what the things that they did, or just like the things that stuck out. But yeah, it's like this group has just a really good synergy with them. They have really good chemistry, and it makes it a lot of fun to listen to. And that's one of the reasons that it's my favorite. It's so much fun to listen to them because of that whole banter. Like I find myself laughing while I'm worried because I'm listening to this podcast, and they're like just kind of like going off on tangents before Pete brings it back in. It's really fun to listen to. So, but there's lots of Disney podcasts out there. Like I said, Anna's two favorites that she listens to is the TTA, which was my number 2, and she has one called Dream Finders that she really likes. And like I said, I'll try to sit her down and do a video with her and talk about some of her favorites as well, so we can kind of go over what that one is kind of like. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to make this video just in case anybody was curious about the Disney podcasts that are available, and just talk about some of my favorite ones. So, like I said, like if you want to find a Disney podcast, there's tons of them. They're all over the place, and it's just really a matter of figuring out listening to a couple of them, figuring out which one you like which people like, which ones have the best chemistry, like if which ones are interesting to listen to versus which ones are really boring, because there are some that are really boring, and that's one of the reasons that I don't listen to them. So but yeah, so thank you for joining me, and don't forget to thank the Phoenicians.